to because he did all these extraordinary lecture series. He used to do a lecture series, sometimes 1 or 2 a year, which are all on free Buddhist audio. I really recommend you go and have a look at those, listen to those. I started listening to his tape lectures, and almost immediately, even though I wasn't looking for a teacher, I wasn't interested in any individual teacher. It never occurred to me. But I was almost completely electrified by, especially the series on the Vimalakirti Nadesha. So the Vimalakirti Nadesha is a brilliant. Well, it's actually a real work of literature. Actually, not all of the Mahayana Sutras are a work of literature, but the Vimalakirti Nadesha is a work of literature. It's beautifully written. And he gave a lecture series exploring that in, I think, 7 or 8 lectures, I can't remember, in 1979, exploring the themes from the Vimalakirti Nadesha. And I remember the one called Building the Buddha Land. I can remember thinking, I don't know who this guy is, but he's my teacher. Not that I was even listening for a teacher. It was as if it was the first time I'd ever heard anyone speak the truth, as it were. There was a sort of, I don't know what you could say, a sort of authority about what he was saying. He was describing something that I'd always thought was true, but I'd never articulated to myself. So that was all within the first few months, really.
Wow.
So so I had this dual response, this sort of rather plump, slightly with long, sort of greasy hair, sort of character. The physical form was not very impressive in a certain sense, but his teachings was profoundly impressive. So I suppose there's the physical form, and then there's the inner experience, which were two sort of. You couldn't quite match the two up. Didn't really seem to match. I don't know what I was expecting of a person, but he didn't match it. He didn't match his voice.
Right.
As it were, I suppose his spiritual charisma, and I use that with a small c.
Yeah. And you refer to him as your teacher.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask you, do you see him as a friend or as a teacher more than a friend, or a mentor, or dare I say a guru? You know.
I don't know. He's sort of somebody. It's really strange experience when you meet people. I mean, we all meet people in our lives, don't we? Have a powerful effect on us. You know, we're suddenly captivated by this person, and often that sort of captivation reaches a limit. It sort of wears out, especially if it's got a strong romantic sort of element. You start off going, wow, and then you go, yeah, I'm not so sure. But with Bhante Sangharashtra, I sort of had that response to him. I wouldn't say I fell in love with him. I didn't fall in love with him, but I was captivated by him. And that's never ended. You know, throughout my life, it never came to an end. I was always more captivated because he always communicated more and more of the Dharma, of Buddhism. And every time he did that, it put another extra dimension to this person that I met, which was a source of tremendous wonder, and I don't know, it just seemed to match something in my experience. It's a slightly uncanny experience, and it's not one that I would I realise a lot of people are never going to have that relationship to him, and you wouldn't expect people to, so it's not something you can expect, but it was certainly my own experience. I was captivated by his spiritual insight, I suppose. And I don't know why I was captivated by it. Because it certainly wasn't to do with his physical being in a certain respect. It was to do with the quality of his being. There was something about his being, you know, and which is very, very difficult to describe.
And did you feel seen by him in a way maybe you hadn't been seen before? Completely. Yeah.
And again, it's very uncanny, you know. What so much of relating is not verbal. It's on a deeply sort of, as it were, unconscious or pre-conscious level. You just don't know when you meet people what you're meeting. And it was the same with him. It was something that you couldn't articulate in words, but it was something that just embraced you in a certain sort of way.
I mean, my impression of him, and I met him a few times, and I heard him speak, but I never developed a kind of personal relationship.
No.
And I sort of have this impression that he never really had many personal relationships. He was a bit other. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And in a funny way, although he was promoting the ideal of spiritual friendship, as did the Buddha, he was quite alone.
Well, the problem is, and I think this is the same. This is, I think, one of the difficulties when you're in that sort of position. Not that I think he saw himself in that position. Is people project onto you. So, for better or worse, nearly everybody sort of was a bit odd in his company. I mean, I can remember the early days, like when he was living with Sidney Ratner, this early order member, and this was in the 1970s. The movement had only been around for about 5 or 6 years. People used to go around to his flat in Muswell Hill. Sidney Ratner was living with him, and people used to come around and were so blocked and everything. Banty would slip him a tenner and say, "Go and get a bottle of wine." So Sidney Ratner used to nip out, get a bottle of wine, because the people were so blocked in his company.
Just to lighten it up.
And he just to get people to relax a bit. So we all bring, it's funny, isn't it, in human relations, isn't it? Why is it we do this with people? We sort of project onto people and then treat them as a bit weird, and a bit special. But for him, that was nothing he could really do about it, it was just what people brought to the party, as it were. So I think our own expectations about what a person should be, you people who wear these sometimes or receive that sort of rather strange projection. You can't help it, you know what I mean? But hopefully we can disarm that as much as we possibly can. So for him that was probably quite frustrating and difficult because he couldn't then be personal himself. Because if people are treating you as being really special, you can't be intimate. It's very difficult. I
mean, it's interesting because at the end of his life, he lived at Adhisthana, where Sanghadeva lives now, and he was there for the last 5 years of his life. And he was an elderly man, he was in his 90s, wasn't he? Yeah. And I remember he developed a real friendship with Sadhanandi, who was the chair of Adhisthana. Yes. And it felt like a friendship he's never quite had before. Yes. That they were almost peers to some extent. Yeah. And she treated him didn't project on him.
She used to call him sweetheart.
Yeah.
I remember Dr. Bowie saying, I'm amazed I've never ever heard someone call Bantu sweetheart. But he loved it.
He really appreciated that.
Because she wasn't treating him as being sort of special.
Yeah. And I remember he said that those were some of the happiest days of his life.
Not because of his relationship with Sadhananda.
No, but with the sort of friendships
the last 2 years as well.
Yeah.
He said what happens in his life. Yeah.
Because he didn't really have many peers, did he?
No, he says that himself. If you read some of his material, he said that he sort of regrets that in a way, that he didn't have anyone. I mean, he had Lama Govinda.
He had a lot of correspondence.
Yeah, so that his peers tend to be people that weren't necessarily in the same country.
Yeah.
So I suppose you could say one peer he had was Govinda. So Lama Govinda set up this movement called the RM Maitreya Mandala in Germany. And him and Bhante formed a very, very close friendship. In fact, Govinda wrote to him 4 days before he died, actually. And you could say they had that sort of equal sort of friendship and relationship. And he learned a lot from Govinda, but they weren't in the same area, you know what I mean? He was in Germany, he was in England.
Yeah.
And their paths sort of went different ways as well. Yeah. But I'm sure he would have loved to have had someone to work with, but he never did.
Because he was very good friends with Dada Rinpoche, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And that was one of his Tibetan teachers back in Kalimpong when he was in India.
Yeah.
And they were very, very close, weren't they? Although there was probably more of a teacher-student relationship, wasn't there? Or do you think that became more of
I think there was a teacher-student relationship, and Sambharakshita was certainly the student.
Yeah.
But what Dada Rinpoche realised, he said that what he realised about Bhante was that he never had to explain things more than once. He realised that this guy was pretty exceptional. This young Westerner.
Yeah.
Was pretty exceptional.
And I think that's, people who are exceptional often don't find many peers, do they? They're kind of one-offs.
Of course they don't.
And in a way, so people are going to gravitate to them, but they're going to feel quite alone in a place sort of way.
And his own character, he said this to himself, his own character was not very demonstrative. You know, he was a very private, sort of introverted, sort of in certain respects, quite introverted. So it wasn't very easy to he didn't sort of hang out, you know what I mean?
I mean, he said he felt he was the last person to set up a Buddhist movement, wasn't he? He didn't really have the right charisma or whatever it is. You know, you look at some of the other teachers who've done that, they're much more charismatic, aren't they?
Like Chogo and Trinker and people like that.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So you met him in 1980.
Yeah.
And then what happened? Just sort of talk a little bit about your path together in terms of him leading up to ordaining you.
Well, I sort of suppose we formed a particular link. I don't know what he saw in me, but he obviously made a bit of a beeline for me in a certain sort of way. And he used to write me very sort of like letters that were sort of I don't know, weren't quite love letters, but they were sort of very intimate. And I think he was trying to draw me out in some sort of way. I think there was a sense of drawing out. He was really good at drawing people out. He would see your potential, and if he saw it, he would just draw you out, as it were. So he was drawing me out in a very particular way, as it were.
And you were happy to be drawn out?
Yeah, very happy to be drawn out. You know, because I suppose that's what we all want, isn't it? Don't we all want to be drawn out? We all want someone to take an interest in us. That's why we tend to find this special person, as it were. We all want drawing out. So he was very good at that. He was very good at drawing people out and sort of giving them a sense of what their potential was. So I was very lucky that I had that for a brief period because he was very good like that.
This was in London.
Yeah, this is in London, South London. And he ordained me with 14 other people at Tuscany in 1983. Gave me the name Sanghadeva.
Oh, so he named you as well. Yeah.
And then our paths we didn't really have very much close contact for a long time, although he was always there in the distance.
But so it's interesting because talking to you more recently, because Bhante died 4 years ago. Yeah. And you said in a way you feel closer than ever. Yeah. Do you want to say a little bit about that?
Well, it's just a very strange thing. I was reading something the other day where you have it in all traditions, like the theory of Arthur, and you have the legends of these great heroes who died, but they're not really dead, they're asleep somewhere waiting to re-emerge into the collective consciousness. I suppose you have this about the resurrection of Christ and stuff like that. But the reason why I'm mentioning that is because I think there's something profoundly psychological and mythological, archetypal about figures in history who seem to, for whatever reason, for better or worse, seem to generate a sort of an imaginative connection that goes beyond the material world, as it were. And I suppose that's what love is. I mean, any of you know people that have died, any of you have been intimate with people that died. When you think about them, are they not present in some way? Are they not there? It does seem that when you're very, very sort of connected to someone that is dead and they mean a lot to you, it's as if they haven't died. And I don't mean this for sort of sentimental reasons. It's almost a tangible experience you have on the level of the imagination. You bring someone to mind, and it's as if they live inside you. It's as if you're not separated from them. I can remember my mother when she was dying. She had a picture of her husband, my stepdad, next to her bed. And at one time she said, "Come on, Norman, you're not calling loudly enough." And she really wanted to die. She wanted to be reunited with her husband. You know what I'm saying? So to her, she was never separated from her husband, as it were. So when someone really important to you dies in your life, it's like you never ever lose that link. And I sort of, you can't prove it, but I sort of feel that we actually live on that level. That's actually a much more real level than this level. This level of reality is like a dream. It said, I was listening to Bernardo Castro, the physicist, and he's very much, I wouldn't say he's anti-materialist. He doesn't see the material world as being the ultimate reality. He sees mind as being the ultimate reality. And he said his impression is that when you die, you have the same experience as you do when you wake up from a dream. You know, you look back at the dream and you think, well, that wasn't very real. You know, that was all a bit imaginative, and you get on with life, and you say that you think that death is more real. So the realm of consciousness, of mind. Sorry, I know we're going off slightly, a bit of a tangent here, maybe. But the level of mind is much, much more powerful than this mind. And I think as you meditate, as you become proficient in meditation, your mind naturally gravitates towards that realm. So when you sit and meditate, it's as if a whole other dimension is starting to open up in your experience, and you start living, and that's what you could call. Well, this is the karma loka, K-A-M-A, not karma as in action. K-A-M-A, karma, sensory experience. You enter the rupa loka. So the rupa loka is the realm of pure form, and what's happening is that your mind is being drawn up to the rupa loka. When you meditate, your mind is being drawn up to the rupa loka, away from the sensory experience. So my sense is that actually relationship on the level of the rupa loka is not dependent on physical presence. It's a level of much more of mind, as it were. And this is a traditional Buddhist teaching, by the way. This is not me just being woo-woo. You know, this is a traditional Buddhist teaching. In my own experience, I go, yeah, no, that's what I experienced in my relationship with Sanghadeva. I sort of think that actually he's still there in some sort of way. And I think that's sort of reasonable. I don't think that's just wish fulfillment.
And I've heard a few other people say that.
I think a lot of people have felt that. And it's very mysterious, and I don't understand it. And I still want to explore that a bit more, and I want to understand, if you can understand it, I want to understand what that's all about a bit more. Because to me, it almost goes against my scientific, materialistic sort of prejudice, as it were. And I don't want to promote naive wishes, do you know what I mean? All that sort of like, I wish it was like that, but no, I want to be a little bit more grounded and think, okay, well, I want to explore this more in my mind and see whether does it stand up to scrutiny a bit more? And so far, it certainly seems very authentic and real. So I don't question that.
So bringing it back a bit to when he was alive,
yes,
rather than when he died.
Yes.
He really promoted the idea of friendship, didn't he?
Definitely.
The really idea of living and working together.
Very much so.
And you've done that your whole life. You've lived by that.
Since I was 23.
That kind of mantra, if you like.
Yeah.
You've really thrown yourself in to cooperative living,
yes,
to community living,
yes,
to right livelihood businesses,
yeah,
to spiritual friendship.
Yeah.
So it's in your DNA, isn't it?
Right.
So do you think that's as relevant today as it ever was?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I thought you might say that.
I think, look, what do we want as human beings? I think what we want to be is we want to be seen. We want to be loved. We want to love ourselves, and we want to be loved by other people.
We want meaning.
We want meaning. Okay, so I think what all people want is we all want community. And what is community? What I'd say is a community that is based not on selfish interest, but on who you are as you are in yourself, as it were. And so many of that, this is only after the event. I realised way after the event that I can look back and describe what I think I was looking for. I wasn't looking for Buddhism. I wasn't even looking for meditation particularly. What I was looking for was what I call non-sexual intimacy. What I wanted to be seen by another human being. I wanted to be witnessed by another human being. That was what I profoundly wanted, because I think I can only become who I am to the extent that I'm witnessed by another person. But I don't want another person to then go, well, you should be doing that, or you should be doing it like this. I don't want, do you know what I mean? I want the freedom to be completely myself, and I want to allow others to be completely who they are. And when you get that meeting of individuals, you get something very, very special. You get something really remarkable can happen, because then you can start growing. Then something in you can start unfolding, because the other people don't want you to be any particular way. They're not trying to shape you or mold you, or sort of cajole you or bully you or everything, so you can grow. And I think this is Sangharaj's great insight. This is insight into the importance of spiritual friendship. Was that you can't really grow and develop unless you have deep spiritual friends, people that witness you and love you, and you know you're loved, and you know that you're taken seriously. And if you've got that atmosphere and environment around you, you can relax. And then it doesn't matter if you make mistakes. It doesn't matter if you're a bit grumpy. I often say the spiritual community is somewhere where you can be at your best and your worst, by the way. Because so often in our relationships, you can be this way here with that person, but you can't do that. A spiritual community, you should be able to be yourself at your best and your worst. Because spiritual friendship draws you out, draws you deeper into yourself.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? When he was talking about this back in the 70s and 80s, it was sort of the family unit was the big ideal, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And I guess it probably is today. Maybe not to such a greater sense. Do you think that threatens that, or do you think those can work alongside each other, or do you think they're contradictory?
I think they can work alongside each other.
Right.
I think the rhetoric was to start with was no, it couldn't, but I don't believe that, to be honest with you. I think that the important thing is that you find out for you what works, okay, and then you create the conditions that suit your own spiritual life. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think every individual is going to find their own way to do that level of intimacy. And I know it can be conflicting. I've got a friend, a woman coming along to my class now. She started to fall in love with Buddhism, and I said to her, she's been practicing since she was, teens really, but not in an institution. And one of the things that happened to her, I said, "Have you thought of going on retreat?" She said, "Well, I'm not sure what my husband would think." You know what I mean? So there's always there can often be a negotiation. It can be a slightly difficult phase of the spiritual life where you're starting to negotiate. Okay, my family is starting to feel threatened by my sort of, you know what I mean? So you have to negotiate, and you have to be very sensitive and very careful around that. And it's for each individual to find their own way. Because when you do start entering spiritual life, it's sort of like falling in love, dare I say. Because you open up emotionally, something in you just starts flowering, starts opening. It's like a lotus, like coming into the sunlight. And it's to do with something beyond, almost beyond relationship in a way. I mean, ultimately it's to do with relationship, but it's like something is pouring down. And Joseph Campbell uses this expression. He talks about the inexhaustible energies of the cosmos streaming towards humanity. Banti puts it even more bluntly. He calls it the transcendental outpourings of the ultimate, the transcendental pourings of the absolute. It's as if there is something flowing towards us, as it were. And sometimes you can feel this in meditation when you sit and you're receptive in meditation. If you sit and just decide, right, there's a good way of doing the metta bhavana, by the way. A bit of meditation advice. Just try and sit in metta and obviously you've got to be open, but just meditate as if something is coming towards you from outside. Just tell a story. You don't have to believe it. Just say, oh, I wonder if there is something coming towards me. Just sit there and allow metta to come towards you from outside, as it were.
And there's, I don't know about you, but certainly within me, there's a longing. There's a real longing. There's a sort of an absence of something that this kind of this plane or this world or this just doesn't quite cut the mustard, does it? And there's that. We were talking about this earlier. This sense of grace, this sense of kind of Adhisthana.
Well, that's what Adhisthana means.
That longing for something greater. And I think that's part of being human in a way, isn't it? And how you fulfill that or how you move towards that.
And I suppose in friendship, what you're doing is you're giving space for other people to experience that. You know, you're sort of like, to the extent that you embody it, you give the other person room to experience it in themselves, as it were. You know, that's what. Well, I suppose that's the idea of Kalyan literature, where there's a sort of slight discrepancy in levels of commitment, where some person is a little bit more.
So just explain Kalyan literature for people.
It means beautiful friendship. Mitra means
noble friendship.
Yeah, noble friendship. So Mitra is literally friendship, but based on the ideas of Maitri, metta, i.e. So it's a friendship that's based on metta, and it's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And it usually occurs between people of slightly different levels of spiritual experience, let's use that word. And so, you know, hopefully when you come into contact with them, you feel a sort of perfume, as it were, or a sort of encouragement, or you feel, when you think of them, you think of yourself as, oh, actually, I'm all right. Because they think I'm all right, so I'm all right. You know what I mean?
And you have that potential in a way with anyone. It's not your kind of special people, is it? It's
you
not
don't have to like. This is the thing about likes and dislikes. You know, what you do when you start practicing friendship in the spiritual context is that your connections with people aren't based on your likes and dislikes anymore. They're based on something much more sort of enduring, you could say, which is your potential for growth and another person's potential for growth. So you relate to each other through your mutual capacity to grow and develop as individuals. And when you start seeing qualities emerge in the other person, you just delight in it. It's just beautiful, which is why it's called beautiful friendship. So you relate to each other on the sort of basis of each other's sort of mutual beauty. You see the beauty in another person, and you forget about it. Like, yeah, of course, people always irritate you and say things you don't want to hear, or the rest of it. But you don't put so much weight by that. So you learn to put that to one side. Yeah, okay, well, that irritates me, but I don't have to focus on that. I can focus on what's beautiful in the person.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Do you think that this idea of friendship, of working together, or living together, is kind of what we need today?
I think
we need to promote. You know, you think of today, don't you think you hear a lot about mental health issues? You hear a lot about social media pressure. You hear a lot about isolation. People feeling quite isolated.
I think it's a terrible problem, and of course this wretched sort of me device, the iPhone, which sort of promotes the idea of your choices. You know, my choice. You know, everyone's in the same. You know, everyone's sort of in the house, family, home, watching their own devices. So you're not actually sitting around the telly watching the same program, but you're all sort of doing your own thing in your own space. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, you could even do that with your Buddhist practice.
Well, I'm afraid you can.
Yeah.
But I think what we all really want, but because we prioritise ourselves, we don't go and seek it out. We need community of some kind. Could be residential, but we need to form some sort of more intimate, sort of regular contact with each other. That's why we have a public centre, and that's a brilliant place to do that, is in the public centre. Getting on retreat, it's another really, really good way of experiencing that, especially if you're practicing silence together, dare I say. Sounds a bit paradoxical, but I think you can almost get closer to people in silence than you can when you're all talking all the time. Yeah, I'd love to see more communities, you know, actual communities developing, and I think there should be more models. And we've got 2 couples that just moved into the house next to us. I mean, they've been ordained for like 50 years. So they formed a little community next to us, and I'd like to see more and more people deciding to live near each other or with each other.
Yeah, because I suppose in the early days it looked a particular way, didn't it?
Yeah, it was.
And there was a lot of young people, a lot of single people, a lot of idealistic people as well.
Yeah.
And there was something amazing about that, and there was something disastrous about that as well. You know, there was there were messes. It was messy. It was messy.
Any situation, living situation, even those of you who are married. You know, it goes peers and next, doesn't it? You just work that out, don't you?
But it strikes me that there was that model, and now maybe there's other models. And we need to explore other ways of doing that, given that there's a lot more diverse range of people coming along, isn't there? Offering an alternative to maybe what's on offer out.
I mean, I've lived in communities since I was in my early 20s. I've always lived in communities. You know, I'm living in a more mixed environment now, which I love. You know, it's 21 to 22 of us living at Ashdana with 100 plus people coming and going all the time. You know, I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
I think I could live on a railway station, to be honest with you. I sometimes feel that. Probably not in this country, but maybe in India or somewhere like that. Lots of people do live on railway stations in India, of course.
It's incredible, isn't it? Because you love people, but you can spend weeks on your own, can't you?
Yeah.
You're very happy in your own company,
of course.
but you also delight in the company of others.
You have to have the whole range.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do, well, I could keep going
on
this, but I'm going to open up a bit.
That's great.
Let the floor have anything they'd like to ask Sanghadeva or me, about. What about this area, really? Oh, we've got Darren.
A lot of what I hear about Bante is from people who met him and have relationships with him in one way or another.
Yes.
I've come to the movement 3 months before he passed.
Right.
So I wonder what your advice is, because I get two quite distinct areas. I read Bante, and it's like reading fireworks. But then in every course I teach, some of the difficulties about him come up as well.
Sure.
And because I don't have the man to kind of reach that, I just wondered what you kind of might have thought about that.
Oh, well, I think actually listen to some of his lectures. You know, hear his voice, listen to his voice, read his work. I mean, it's a pity we don't have the unedited seminars, because I think they're absolute gems. I think we are working on them, actually. I think we're going to do a light edit on them, because we've got the complete works, which is great, but it's quite edited. So to get to see him interacting with people in an ordinary environment, which is the unedited seminars, and they're going to come out as slightly edited seminars. They'd be really good to look at as well. It's difficult to know, really, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't give any general advice on that, because I think every individual is going to have their own way, but certainly listen to his lectures.
I think it's much easier to discuss one-to-one with someone than it is to a group.
Yeah.
Because everyone's bringing their own particular background and conditioning and issues, dare I say,
exactly.
So it's hard to come up with an approach, isn't it?
Really, no. But I certainly listen to his lectures. I mean, I saw him a couple of times, but it didn't make any impression on me, to be honest with you, when I met him. You know, it's just this sort of middle-aged bloke, you know, but when I listened to his lectures, when I heard his voice, I heard the way he articulated what he was saying and the way he built up his arguments, etc. That's when my relationship with him completely changed. But actually listening to his lectures isn't so popular these days. And we used to do, when we did miniature study, we used to sit down, a group of us, about 4 or 5 of us would sit down with a notepad and a pen, and we'd have a cassette. Probably some of you don't even remember what they looked like, but we had a cassette tape recorder, we put the cassette in the tape recorder, and we would play it, and we would just take notes. So we listened to all of his lectures, well, not all of them, but we listened to hundreds of his lectures like that. And that's a really good way to get to know him if you really want to do that. We did a thing, didn't we, which was really good on. We did it on. We studied one of his lectures here. Evolution or extinction, a Buddhist view of current world problems. And Vajrapriya very skillfully had edited in some extracts of the actual lecture. I think that's something we should be doing generally much more. I think we should be doing that at Adhisthana. Actually, in fact, Subnandi did it on the tree planting retreat when we did study. She was doing some study of a talk of his, and she would illustrate it with extracts from the talk. So that's a really good way.
I guess we have all that written material, don't we? We have all the audio material. We have stuff on that we can watch as well.
Exactly.
And then we still have people that, like yourself, that knew him, had a kind of more of a personal relationship, should I say? So we've still got that, and so we're starting to set up this kind of, you know, I know disciples of disciples of disciples. Some people don't like the word disciple, but that kind of, you know, that's what's happening, I guess, isn't it?
I think it's also to appreciate his utterly unique perspective on Buddhism. I don't think there's many people, Govinda probably got closest to it, who have this extraordinary broad view of the Buddhist tradition. I mean, I think I'm in awe of that, because most other traditions, they will be promoting their particular strand of Buddhism. But Bhante, right from when he was 17, in fact, there's a funny story about him turning up at the Buddhist Society when he was 17. He'd just written this extraordinary article when he was 16 called The Unity of Buddhism. When he was 16, he sent it up to the Buddhist Society and they put it in their magazine. And when Claire Cameron came in, expecting to see this sort of middle-aged man, because his English was so extraordinary, there was this 17-year-old boy who'd written this article on the unity of Buddhism. So he understood from 17 that Buddhism wasn't all these different sects and schools. There was a unified teaching behind the Buddha. Now, even if you sort of realise that should be enough to make you realise how exceptional that was, to have that insight at such an early stage of the life. And he's always promoted the unity of Buddhism. Like when he went to Kalimpong, what did he do? For the first time ever, all the Buddhists in Kalimpong were cooperating, celebrating the Buddhist festivals, which they'd never done before. How old was he? 21, 22. And he was organising these schools of Buddhism, the Gelugpas and the Nyingmas, and he was getting them all to come together. And he convinced them, and they did this big procession through the streets of Kalimpong, you know what I mean? Which he organised. So read his Precious Teachers is, for me, his best autobiography. But read his autobiographies. They're absolutely brilliant. Really, you get a real insight into his character, because a lot of it, he describes his relationship to very ordinary people, like Miss Barclay. This old woman who lived at one of these Buddhist places, who was treated extremely badly. His whole attitude to Mrs. Barclay, for instance.
Oh. Hello, welcome.
Hello. Sorry to interrupt.
That's all right.
So this woman, Mrs. Barclay, who no one else was paying any attention, she was almost destitute. She was dirty, dishevelled. Bhante just took complete pity on her and kindness, and cleaned her up, made it, organised her life a bit. You know what I mean? So all these stories of little acts of kindness and compassion throughout his life, and watching him interact with people. So I would say, really do read. Take something like The Precious Teachers, which doesn't include that incident in it, but take his autobiography and just delve into that and read it.
We're just talking about the founder of this movement, Sanghadeva, and we're having a bit of a discussion about him. We're nearly at the end of that, actually. Then we're going to have a cup of tea, and then we'll probably meditate together. So just to kind of fit you in where we are.
Okay, great, thanks.
Is there anyone else who's got questions for?
I just wondered, following his death, what were the weeks after his death at Adhisthana? What was it like being there in the weeks after his death?
What was it like? Well, to be honest with you, I was just in the garden, so I don't really know. I was just gardening, probably. What it was like for those that were, as it were, running Adhisthana, I don't really know. But I think there was, I can't really remember, to be honest with you. I mean, I think the whole period leading up, what was very, very remarkable was that he died. I'd just been up to the Birmingham Wholesale Market to buy a load of wallflowers. So I came back with all the great mushroom boxes full of wallflowers, like thousands of wallflowers. And Kasha Jyoti came up to me in the barn. She said, Sanghadeva Bhante's just died. I just thought, okay, you know what I mean? I didn't really feel shocked or anything like that. But what was weird was there was an international Buddhist course running. There was the public preceptors were there. There was a big order weekend coming up. And so at the time of his death, there were suddenly hundreds of people at Adhisthana around his body. So his body was laid out in the refugee shrine room on the top of his his coffin, and there were just hundreds and hundreds of people, and all his main disciples were all there. So it's almost as though he worked it out.
Mm.
And he died 3 days after I finished his burial mound. So I was working on his burial site. I was me and Abhayanara were working on it actually. And 3 days after the diggers left, he died. It's almost as though he worked it all out. You know, it was very uncanny in a way. But there was a sort of beautiful atmosphere. It was difficult to describe really. I think I was probably too involved in the sort of practical details to really pay much attention, to be honest with you.
I remember when hearing about it, and then everyone just came here.
Yeah.
A lot of people just wanted to come here.
Yeah.
And then we had a kind of vigil, if you like, every day for quite some time. Yeah. But it's just like people just gravitated to this place just to kind of, just to sit and meditate. Yeah. Anyone else got any, now's your chance.
What made you choose Shrewsbury when you were doing the outreach?
Well, I didn't choose Shrewsbury, Vajragupta chose it for me, sort of thing. So Vajragupta, he's a remarkable man. He's the current chair of the centre that I first got in contact with, Croydon, of which I'm the president, I'm pleased to say. He was the chair of the Birmingham Buddhist Centre, and he's utterly extraordinary, because what chair of which centre would decide that at one time they would set up 4 outreach groups? That is one of the Buddhas that was at one of the quarters of the Birmingham Buddhist Centre, along with 3 others identical to that. So they did this ritual, and I wasn't present at it. They had, in the shrine, they had the main image, and then they had 4 other shrines, and then they, as it were, ritually took the Buddhas out to the different groups. So there was Warwick, Shrewsbury, Worcester, Sutton Coldfield. This is now a centre. The Warwick group is still going, and I have close association with, and the Worcester Centre is still going. So that's utterly remarkable that a chair of a centre would do that, and I wish some of the other chairs would take that on as a mission, because I think we should do a lot more outreach. That's what he did. And Vajragupta just got in touch with me one day and said, "Oh, you fancy working with me a bit?" I knew his brother, but I didn't know him. I knew because his brother came through the Croydon Centre. And I thought, yeah, okay, that's good. And I love Abhayanara, you know, and our friendship developed through just coming up here every week for years and years and years, driving up from Birmingham every Wednesday night, eating sandwiches, and we'd love talking about everyone in the class. It was, oh yeah, sometimes they're brilliant, oh yeah, what about them? Oh, fantastic, yeah. It's lovely, just a mutual rejoicing in everyone that comes to the class. Because you're all like flowers. It's lovely. It's like having a bunch of flowers, you know. Some of you coming up, some of you probably wilting occasionally and stuff like that. But it is lovely when you sort of offer the Dharma to the world. It is literally, you do feel a bit like a gardener. You get very emotionally involved. You get really emotionally involved with people, because you've got something that you really want to share with the world, and there are people there who are receptive, you know, and are very open. So you want to give them what you have, as it were. You want to share with them what you've got. And when people start growing and developing and changing and getting it, you just feel, it fills you with delight and with wonder in a way.
So you're in your mid-60s now, aren't you?
I am.
You're not slowing down.
I'm not.
You're still at Adhisthana.
I am.
How do you see the next few years panning out? What really excites you? What inspires you to get? What would you like to see happen, I suppose? What would you like to see us do as well?
I'd like to see you get out there and do stuff. You know, don't huddle together in one place. You know, it's always my thing is see yourself as having dharmic agency. The thing is, you can befriend other people. That's the other thing. The other thing I see is don't leave it up to the order members. Like someone came up to you at the centre and asked you about yourself, and you had an experience of being taken seriously. You could do that for other people. So I can remember Pabhavajra, this is a funny story actually, years and years ago when I was first, well, I think even before I was a mitra, I came along to the centre with a friend of mine, and we were chatting together. We'd known each other since we were 8 years old. And Prabhavajra, you could do this sort of thing then. You couldn't do it. You couldn't get away with it now. He came up to us and very roughly grabbed us by the arm. He took us into the next room and he said, look, you guys have known each other since you were 8 years old. There are people here that have never been talked to. Go and talk to people. You couldn't do that now. But
you could try.
You could try. Go and talk to people. Just because you think you're new, you can always make friends with people. Make friends with people. Sort of, see yourself as actually having something to offer. Believe in yourself, as it were. Do you know what I mean? Take an interest. Just like someone took an interest in you, pass it on to somebody else, as it were. And don't just think that you haven't got that capacity, because you have, because you've got the capacity to show an interest. It's easy, you just have to sort of get outside your own immediate concerns. And that's easy. It takes a bit of effort, but try it. So that's the sort of tough. That's the tough message. Come on.
What's the soft message?
There isn't one. Really.
Okay.
Don't see yourself as being weak. Do not cry that you are weak. Spread your secret wings. That poem by Bhante. Do not cry that you are weak. You're not weak. You're strong. Don't see yourself as weak. Don't see yourself as not having the capacity. We've all got something to offer the world. Believe in yourself and find someone to believe in you. I.e. make a beeline towards someone who will befriend you and then pass that on to the world. Because that's what the world needs. It needs befriending, on the level of this level, not on the ordinary mundane. We're not talking about what programs you've watched on television last week, but how are you? Are you fulfilled? Are you happy? What further conditions do you need to grow and develop as an individual? However you say that, I wouldn't say it quite like that, but that's really what you're trying to communicate to people. The world needs it because we're just consuming ourselves. You know what I mean? We're just gobbling up everything. It's like this great big gobbling machine, isn't it? And it's like, hold it. What about the environment? What about other? You know what I mean? Let's just stop a minute. Let's just consider other and stop focusing on ourselves so much. But we need resources to do that. We can't do it on our own. That's why you need a spiritual community. You need a spiritual community because sometimes you do flag. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing now. And somebody says, well, you could do that. You're fine. Just need to do that. Just practice the Metta-bhavana more.
I think that's probably a good place to leave it,
Do the
isn't it?
Metta-bhavana.
Do the Metta-bhavana.
That could be the message for you.
Great. So thank you, Sanghadeva. He always says yes when I invite him up here to come and talk to us. He's always available. So thank you very much for coming up, for talking to us, spending time with us, and look forward to the next time.
Yeah, indeed.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay, folks, let's go and have a much needed cup of tea.
You're right.
Look at him there. If we did today, would you leave? Sit? Yeah, I couldn't do that. I could just sit in the back and just. Well, we finish at 9. So the date now, so we're probably about 20-25 minutes in, right? So it'll be about half an hour. Yeah.
Hello.
Yes.